This is the Cabay bag and it's a brand new double zippered bag sewing pattern from me at Studio 77. On this video tutorial, I'm going to take you through how to make this bag step by step. It's a really cute pattern. It comes together surprisingly quickly, and wait till you see what it holds inside. Now there are two main zippered pockets to this bag. As you can see, I have put double zippers on there and I recommend that you do the same as well. As you open them up, we have slip pockets on both sides inside. You can choose whether you have a lining slip pocket or a mesh slip pocket as to your preferences. And then on one side, we have these side gussets as well. So it's going to stop the bag opening completely flat and everything falling out on that one side. You have the option of putting in a zipper pocket along the outside panels. I have just done one here, but you could do two with one on the back as well. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you just the one, but again, you can choose to have two. The other zipper pocket is very similar, except for this side opens completely flat. So you can lay it down with the zipper opening a lot wider without those side gussets. And of course, if you want to, you can omit the slip pockets and you could put in some elastic and have brushes or pencils, whatever you'd like to have in there instead. Hi, I'm Emma from Studio 77, and on this video tutorial I'm going to take you through everything step by step. If you have any questions, comments or queries at all throughout the video, please do pop them in the comments box below, and you can find everything that I talk about in the description too. This is the Cabay bag, and the reason why I've called it the Cabay is because I have designed it to keep your cables away and out of sight. When you're traveling, it can be hard to find a small bag that can fit all of those things in a really organized and neat manner. So that's where this name came from, Cable Away Cabay. It is also in the kind of collection of my other bag, which is called the Nighway. And the Nighway stands for Night Away. Maybe you'll see some more in that collection coming this year. Right, before we get into the tutorial, there are some things that I need to tell you about that are really things that you need to think about when you're getting started with your planning for this bag. So one thing you need to think about when you're choosing your fabrics for this bag is that there is binding inside. There are some tricky thick areas when you go through it. If you're finding it too thick, don't forget to go up a needle and try a jeans needle as well. Something to think about for this bag is that I have not used stabiliser on the outside pieces, on the outside panels of this version here. As you can hopefully see, it is made from faux leather or vinyl. And so that is quite a good structural fabric to use for lots of bags because it means that you can avoid using stabiliser. However, I wanted to show you in this tutorial the difference between using stabiliser and not using stabiliser on the outside panels. So I am using a stabiliser throughout this tutorial, but you can choose whether you leave it off or not. I do recommend, if you are using a quilting cotton, that you might want to use a stabiliser just to make it have that more structured feel. But of course, you do you. You don't have to use stabiliser. You can omit it completely. However, I do really recommend that you use it for the middle panel because it's going to give you the structure and hold out your zippers and give you the look that you want. I'm going to talk a little bit more about using stabiliser and what to consider when you're preparing for this project. So check out that in the next section of this video. On that topic, you can find timestamps below in the description as well, so you can skip ahead or go back to any section that you may find you want to watch again. Don't forget, when you've finished your make, to share it in the 77 Club if you are a 77 Club member, or in the public Facebook group. You can find all the details in the description as well. Shout out to my 77 Club members because you have got this pattern new and exclusive for 2 months while it is in the club. If you're watching after that, you can find the link to purchasing this pattern in the description below. And a little side note, I do have guinea pigs in my workshop, so you may hear them squeaking a little bit at times throughout this tutorial, but I have tried to stop that as much as possible. Let me know in the comments if you do catch any of their squeaks because it will really make me smile. All right, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is to find the pattern. You can find a link to that in the description below. If you are a member of the club, you will have this on email, and you can also find it in the club membership area within the first quarter of 2025. If you're watching after that, you can also find a 50% off coupon to get this from the pattern shop if you're watching this after that date. If you want to buy it on retail, there's also a link on that in the description too. Once you've printed that out, you're going to cut out all of your paper pattern pieces, and then you're going to want to cut out all your fabrics. Now for this tutorial, I am using 3 different fabrics. I have got this embossed faux leather, and I'm going to use that for the main panels on front and back. I have then got a plain faux leather, and I'm using that for the zipper panels, the bits that go around the bag. And then I have got this waterproof canvas, which I'm using for all my lining pieces. So you're going to want to decide on your fabric. If you are using a quilting cotton, that's totally fine. You're going to want to go ahead and interface all of your pieces with a woven interfacing for your outer and a non-woven for your lining. As I'm using waterproof canvas, I am not interfacing any of my lining. I am, however, interfacing my faux leather, and there is one main reason for that. In fact, there's 2 main reasons for that. One is to help avoid any more stretch. If there is a little bit of stretch or give, we want to try and limit that. And the other reason is so that our stabiliser is going to stick really nicely to the back of the faux leather. So for my outer pattern piece 1, my main panel, I have cut out 2 in the outer fabrics, and then I have cut out 4 in my lining fabric, and that's in that waterproof canvas. So there's 4 lining and 2 outer. With this pattern piece, I've actually printed this out twice, as you can see, and that is because one piece I have cut off my seam allowance. It just makes life a lot easier to go around those curves. Then you also want to cut out all the hole placements. So we've got these handle placements and we've got this zipper pocket placement. You're only going to cut that out of the paper pattern pieces. You're not going to cut that out of your actual pattern pieces. When it comes to the stabiliser for the outer, we're actually going to be cutting out 3 stabiliser pieces for this pattern piece 1. You're going to want to decide how many pockets you're going to have on the outside. So you're going to have 1 front and back, or you're just going to have 1. For this tutorial, I'm just going to do 1, but feel free to do 2 if you want to. Depending on how many zipper pockets you're going to have, depend on how many of your stabiliser pieces you're going to cut out that zipper pocket hole. So I am just going to have 1 on the front. I'm not going to have 1 on the back, so I'm just cutting out 1 of the zipper pocket holes. However, you do want to cut out the handle pocket holes, handle placement, out of both. So you can see here I have got, this is my back piece that I'm going to use, so I'm going to have the front with the zipper pocket on, and the back piece I have also cut out of the stabiliser the handle placement holes. So you can see this will then be fused onto the back of here. You can see that I have drawn around that with a friction pen so that when I place that on and heat that together, I get that in a really nice and aligned place. So I'm going to go ahead and fuse that before we move on. When it comes to that 3rd piece of stabiliser, we're just going to fuse that on later on, so don't worry about that too much for now. So we've got those 2 fused to our main panel, which is pattern piece 1. Moving along, I'm going to go through them numerically. So we've got our pattern piece 2, which is our outer, and then we've got a lining as well. I am not going to add stabiliser to my zipper panels and my gussets because I'm using faux leather or vinyl, if you want to call it. If you are using a quilting cotton, you're going to want to think about adding stabiliser because that's going to help give you more structure. So that's the same with pattern piece 3. I have got an outer and I have got my lining, and pattern piece 4. Notice here how I have printed off 2 and then I've taped them together to get that full length. You can choose how you do it, or you can use the cutting chart as well. We're going to have 3 linings for this one, and we're going to have 3 outers. Pattern piece 5 is our side gusset. Now when you look at the pattern piece, it shows you where the top edge is, and I do that on all my patterns so that you know when you're cutting, if you've got a directional fabric, how you're going to want to place that. So just bear that in mind because it's going to be folded over. So we're going to cut 2 of those. Pattern piece 6 is our zipper pocket. Again, this is optional, so you're going to want to choose whether you have no pockets on the outside, 1 or 2. I've got 1, like I said, so I've just cut one of those. Pattern piece 7 is our slip pocket. And there's something to talk about with pattern piece 7 as well, because this obviously goes on the inside of the bag. Now, if we're cutting out of regular lining fabric, we're going to be folding it over, so you don't need to worry too much. You need to think about the direction of your print if you have one, because again, the fold line is that red line in the middle, so think about that for your pattern placement. If you are using the mesh, you're going to fold the pattern piece in half and you're going to cut it on that red line for the stretch mesh. When you're cutting out your stretch mesh, you want to think about the direction of the stretch as well. So you want it to be going left to right and not up and down. That's really important, because otherwise when you put your items in, when you're using the bag, you're not going to have enough give that you're going to want, and that's the reason for using this stretch mesh. Connected to those pieces are the fold over elastic. I'm using grey here to match my mesh. It's important we use fold over elastic, again, to allow the give in the stretch mesh to go with the elastic. So I am going to be doing 2 pockets in the mesh and 2 in the lining for our slip pockets on the inside. And then finally we have pattern piece 8, which is our connector facing. Honestly, you could use any fabric that goes together with your outer fabric. It doesn't have to be that exact lining, and you're definitely going to want to interface this unless you are using something like a waterproof canvas. And when it comes to this pattern piece, it's really important to note that the placement of the rectangle does have to be copied out from this pattern piece. I tried so much to make it so that it could be drawn on easily with centimeters and inches, but it was just too tricky to get it to line up exactly right. There's too many factors going into play with the zipper pocket placement and everything else. So just print off that one pattern piece and use that rectangle for your connector facing. When it comes to the zipper, you're going to want the amount of short zippers as per your outer zipper pocket. So I'm doing 1, so I've got 1 cut up, and then you're going to want to have 2 of your longer zippers. I like to have 2 zipper pulls facing. You could just have 1, but I think it's a little bit trickier to open and close, so I do recommend you have 2 on each zipper. If you're not sure how to do that, I do have a video. I will link to that up on the cards and also in the description if you want to see how to do that easily. I'm also going to be putting on a handmade metal tag, but you don't have to, that's obviously optional. I'm going to be using 8mm double capped rivets. You could use a single cap rivet because the inside or the back of the rivet is on the inside, so that's totally up to you. And then for the binding, I'm going to be using adhesive Hexatex. Again, I will pop a link to where I got that in the description too. I really like it for binding. It makes life a whole lot easier. You could use regular bias binding though, of course, as well. Oops, I almost forgot, we are of course going to be needing some handles. So I have got this 1 inch or 2.5 centimeter webbing, and this is really important that you choose an inch size because it is going to be going into our connector facings. And of course we're going to need 2 lengths of that. Okay, I think that's everything for prepping up. We're going to obviously want to be using our regular sewing tools. I'm definitely going to be using double-sided sewing tape. Links to everything is in the description. Do ask me if you have any questions as we go along though as well. Okay, so we're going to start off with pattern piece 1, the main panel. And we're going to pop the linings to one side for a minute and work on the outer. Also going to pop the stabiliser to one side. And I'm going to be choosing where I'm going to put my metal tag on. Obviously this is optional, so just skip ahead if you don't have a metal tag. You could also use a cute woven label if you have one as well. Okay, so I am going to have mine on the back, which doesn't have the zipper pocket on it. So I'm going to measure down and I'm going to place this near the should I have it near the, I think I'm going to have it near the top actually. I'm going to make sure it's in the middle away from those connector handles as well. And I'm actually going to use the pattern piece and the zipper pocket placement to figure out where the top and the middle of my tag is going to go. So that is, let's just make another mark. and insert the metal tag. And all of the fabric, the zippers and this metal tag came from the Advent box from myself, which was for 2024. And it's always good to pop a little bit of gaffer tape on the back. I only seem to have this rainbow one, but it's totally fine. It's going to be on the inside, just to keep everything nice and snug. Okay, so that's my back panel. I'm going to pop that to one side and we're going to work on the zipper pocket. So with our zipper pocket, we're just going to flip that round to the back and we're going to measure down 1.5 centimeters or 9/16 of an inch from the top. And I'm going to draw a line and we're going to be drawing a rectangle that is 17 centimeters wide by 1 centimeter high. So I'm going to find the middle and I'm going to measure 17 centimeters. And if you have a zipper overlay template, you can use that quite nicely, even if it's not the right size, because we've measured out 17 centimeters. What I haven't done is I haven't marked on the middle. So I'm just going to quickly mark that on. Middle and sides, where the notches are on the pattern piece. We've got the middle of this piece now. So I'm going to mark that to the outside for here so we can see that. And we're going to place that pocket piece 2 centimeters down from the top. And it's going to be centered because we're going to line up those notches. Put some clips in. Now we're going to stitch around that rectangle and I'll show you, I'm going to go smaller at the corners. I always start my zipper pockets at the top in the middle. I'm going to be using a 2.5 stitch length and then I'm going to go down to quite small, even though I'm using a faux leather because it is a zipper pocket. So I'm going to start in the middle. I'm not going to go backwards and forwards or cast on because I'm going to tie the threads through afterwards. When I get to the end, I'm going to go, or towards the end, a few stitches away, I'm going to go down to a 1.5. End with my needle down. And then I'm going to continue with those small stitches to the bottom. And I'm going to carry on for a few stitches. And then I'm going to extend back up to a 2.5 stitch length. A few stitches before the end, go back down to a 1.5. Pivot. Pivot again. And then extend back up to 2.5 to the end. I'm going to pull the work out and with any luck it's going to be similar to your stabiliser on the back. I've gone off a little bit but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm going to pull the threads through. Another option as well is to stitch from the stabiliser side once you have got your zipper pocket placement correct. Then you can follow that line, the rectangle that you've cut out in your stabiliser. Bend the ends of my thread. And then I'm going to cut a line right the way through and I'm going to fork the ends. So if I grab a pen, I can show you. So you're drawing, cutting, you won't be drawing. We're going to be cutting like that. So we've got a fork at each end and a line down the middle. And when we cut, we are snipping as close as we can to those threads, but we're not cutting through them. It's really important we don't cut them. If you do end up cutting them, you can just go over that section with some more stitching. Then I'm going to push that right the way through to the other side. Don't be afraid to give it a wiggle to help it lie exactly how we want it to be. Sometimes the fibres need a bit of telling where we want it to go. If you are using quilting cotton, you can then press it at this stage to get that to lie really nice and flat. We are trying to get the lining to be just past that top layer. Ideally, we don't want to see any of the lining. Another option to make a bit of a feature is to have that lining showing. We're going to grab our smaller zip and our trusty double-sided tape, and we're going to place our double-sided tape on the edges of our zip, top and bottom. At this point, you want to be definite that you have got your pull attached. It's very easy to forget that part. And then because I haven't been able to press this because it is the faux leather, I'm just going to make sure I tweak that as I place it on top. When I think about which way you want your zipper pocket to open, I always have mine closing on the left. And you want your zipper to line up with the lining underneath, the lining end. So this can be a little bit fiddly. Just a lot of tweaking to get it right. Okay, so once you have tweaked it to your heart's content, we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to top stitch with a 3.5 or 4, depending on what you want to do for your top stitch, a 3.5 or 4 stitch length on the machine. Okay, once that's stitched, I'm going to pull all my threads through to the back and tie them off, just like we did before. I'm going to bring up the bottom of the zipper pocket and we're going to match it to the top. Put some clips in. And you should find that it clears the handle hole placement. Okay, and then we're going to, from the front, we're going to stitch, I'm going to pull the front out the way, and we're going to stitch from the bottom, along the side, all the way along that top, and then down the other side. And I'm going to change to a zipper foot for this, so I can get nice and close to the end of the zipper. And we're stitching with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is our seam allowance throughout. The only place that it's not that is when it comes to the zipper panel, but I'll talk you through that. And I'm using a 2.5 stitch length on all my structural seams for the lining and a 3 for the faux leather. I'm going to open up my zipper for this bit to make it a bit easier to get nice and close. So now that that pocket is done, if you're doing one on the back piece, you're going to want to repeat that with the other pattern piece 1 main panel, the other pattern piece 6 zipper pocket, and the other short zipper. So I'm going to move on to adding in the handles or the straps. So for that, we're going to need 1 of our pieces of webbing, and we're going to need 2 of our connector facings, which is pattern piece 8. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the connector facings for this panel. So we're going to need our 2 pattern piece 8s, and we're going to need this pattern piece with that cutout as well. Now it's worth noting, of course, we have got these cutouts of our stabiliser on the back, so you can use that placement as well, or instead of, I should say. You're going to place your connector facing face down, and we are going from that middle mark on the pattern piece 1, and it needs to be 4 centimetres over. So I'll grab my ruler, and it needs to be so that there is an overhang of the pattern piece 8 connect facing. It's going to be overhanging by 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to pop a clip to hold that in place. Now at this point, you can go ahead and draw on that rectangle, because we're going to be stitching it through just like we did for our zipper pocket. However, I am going to turn it over and I'm going to stitch through from the back. I wanted to show you both ways that you could do it. So when I did the zipper pocket, I stitched through from the back of the zipper pocket lining, but this time I'm going to stitch through from the stabiliser, so you can see the difference. I'm also at the same time going to place on my other one. I'm going to do both at the same time, and that is again 4 centimetres from that middle line. If I can get my ruler to work. 4 centimetres from that middle line, and it is 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch up from overhanging the top, the connect facing overhanging the top. So I'm going to stitch around those 2 rectangles on the machine using a 2 stitch length. And then, just like before, I'm going to pull all those threads through to finish it off. So you may have guessed the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line and cut through the middle and a fork at each end, just like we did for our zipper pocket. We're cutting through both layers just like before. And we're going to push those facings through to the back. And again, just like before, give it a nice wiggle to get those fibres to sit where we want them to. Then we're going to grab one of our webbing pieces and we're going to place it in the left hand hole. And we're lining it up with the bottom of the connector facing on the back. Then we're going to fold down the top part of the connector facing. Don't worry if it's a bit longer, it might be. And we're going to pop a clip in there. We're going to take that over to the machine and we're going to sew through those 3 layers. We're not sewing through the pocket or the outer main panel. We're just sewing through those 3 layers, and we're sewing close to the bottom, making sure we're getting all of those layers in there. We're just going back and forth a couple of times. I'm using a 3 stitch length. The reason for the slightly longer stitch length is because we don't want to perforate it as much, and this is a structural part. Now that that's in place, that's really secure, but I am going to add a rivet just below that strap to hold it in place. If you're not using rivets, you could also stitch all the way around the rectangle. I like to go around the back just to keep that in place as well, but you could just do 1 line underneath to keep that strap nice and secure. And as you may have guessed, I'm going to do the same with the strap or the handle on the other side. It's really important to be careful not to twist that top, so just be aware when you're popping that in and stitching it together. I'd also like to point out here, can you see that the lining of the facing is showing a little bit on there? And that is because I didn't pull the facing down on that front part enough, whereas on this one I pulled it down more before I stitched it together on the back. So that's worth noting. Get a better finish when you can do that. It's too late for me, but hopefully it's not too late for you. Alright, so that's one of our front panels done. I'm going to go ahead and repeat the strap connector facings for the handle on the other side and the other panel, the other outer panel or main panel, pattern piece 1. Okay, so we've got our 2 outer panels done. We're going to move along to the inside lining. So for that, we're going to need our slip pocket pieces, and we're going to need our lining of pattern piece 1, which is here. So we're going to grab those 4 linings, and then, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to do 2 slip pockets with the lining fabric and 2 with the mesh. So we're going to start off with the lining. I'm going to grab one of my pattern piece 7, just put those to one side, grab my pattern piece 7, and I'm going to fold it so that it is long edge to long edge, wrong sides together. And for me, I think my fabric is better that way up. It's slightly kind of non-directional, but sometimes it looks directional, so you have to be careful with this one. And I'm going to top stitch along that folded edge a couple of millimeters, or about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm going to use a 3.5 stitch length. Because I am doing 2 pockets, I'm going to repeat that with another one of pattern piece 7. I'm going to pop one to one side for a second, grab one of my lining pieces, I'm going to place that part that we've just stitched, pattern piece 7, on top, and I'm just going to clip it around the bottom edge to keep them all together. Now you could, if you want to, you could baste those 2 layers together before we do this next step. I'm not going to, I'm just going to place that on top because we're going to baste it in a second. I'm going to lay that on top now that that's clipped together, and mark on that middle line with a friction pen, or you could use a chalk pen. And I just like to lift it up, place a little mark, and then you can grab any straight line ruler and draw that on, and then we can use that for stitching it down. Now I'm going to go over to the machine, I'm going to baste those 3 layers around the bottom, and then I'm going to top stitch down that middle line, and I'm going to make sure that I go backwards and forwards at the top. Another thing that you could do is you could start around 1 centimetre or 1.5 centimetres lower, or 3/8 of an inch lower, and put a rivet in the top, being careful to avoid your top stitching when you're cutting your hole, and that gives it a bit more strength. But I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to back stitch back and forwards a couple times, and I'm going to pull the threads through and knot them to make that nice and secure. This is going to be a stress point, so it's worth making it really nice and strong. And when I'm basting this, I'm basting it within the seam allowance, a couple of millimeters, or around 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so that slip pocket is now done. You're going to repeat that with the other one or the other 3 if you're using this same technique of doing your lining. If you're doing the mesh, I'm going to show you that now. So we've cut out our mesh. Just double check that you have cut it with the stretch going left to right rather than up and down. That's really important to give us the use of the pocket. You're going to want to have some fold over elastic, and I've cut mine to be just a bit wider than the panel. And also, on a word of the cutting out, when you're cutting out the panel, you're going to want to cut it on with the top edge on that red line in the middle of the pattern. Okay, we're not going to be folding this one over. And all we're going to do is we're going to fold the fold over elastic around that edge. I'm going to clip it, and then I'm going to stitch along the edge. Now there's 2 trains of thought. You can add a zigzag stitch to help with the stretch. I have actually found when I'm using the Tex 35 thread that I don't need to do that. I can just do a straight stitch. You can also use a stretch thread like the Gutermann Mara, and that will help to give you a little bit of give. You may need to test that on your machine as to which version of that works for you. If you're finding that the fold over elastic is a little bit slippy, you can add in some double-sided tape. I like to have that on the bottom edge of the fold over elastic, lay the mesh on top, and then you can fold that over the top and stitch in place, and that just gives it an extra layer of security when you're stitching on the machine. I'm also using a longer top stitch length, so a 3.5, and if possible it's good to use a walking foot if you can. I don't have one for this machine, so I've just got my Teflon foot on. When you're sewing, you want to really avoid stretching the mesh, because if you stretch the mesh, it's obviously going to go out of shape. So just gently glide it through. So that's stitched. You can see that I am able to still kind of stretch it a little bit with that stitch length and that thread. And then we're going to grab one of our lining pieces that we haven't got a slip pocket attached to, and I'm going to lay that mesh on top. Now you can see that it has naturally pushed it out of the shape a little bit. That's because I didn't use a walking foot, but hopefully yours will be in sync. If it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to trim that off. So I'm going to clip that around the bottom edge, making sure that it's nicely aligned. And then I'm going to baste that along that bottom edge. But before I do that, I'm just going to grab my pattern piece and mark the middle. You can of course just fold it and mark it that way. I'm going to put a mark on with a friction pen, and I don't think it's going to mark very well on this mesh. Pretty sure it won't, but I'm going to attempt to mark it all the way down. It might go through to the base of the slip pocket, or the base of that panel, which means I can see. Yes, okay, great. So I'm going to baste around that bottom, and then I'm going to stitch it down the middle. I'm going to be using a long stitch around the bottom, and then I'm going to be using a 3.5 stitch down that middle. Now, just like I mentioned on the other slip pocket, but it's worth mentioning again, you can put a rivet at the top to help make that really nice and strong. This is going to be a heavy use area, so we want to bear that in mind. Or we can just go back and forth a couple of times and pull the thread through and secure it off at the back to make that really nice and strong at the top of that pocket. So now that's done, I'm going to repeat that for my other slip pocket that I want to have the mesh on. Of course, if you're doing 4 like this, then you're going to want to do it 4 times. Don't mind my guinea pigs in the background. Okay, so with all of my slip pockets now done, we're now going to attach the last stabiliser to the back of one. You can choose which one it's going to be, it doesn't really matter, but it does need to be one of the 2 that are going to be in the middle of the bag, but it doesn't matter which side of that it is. So I'm going to place that on, I'm going to heat that with my heat press and get that nice and centralised, and then we can move along. Okay, so I've got the stabiliser on the back of there. I'm going to choose which one I'm going to have on the back of that. So I think I'm going to have the other one with the regular slip pocket, so that they are back to back. I'm going to baste, clip and then baste all the way around the edge to keep those 2 together. Okay, so that's going to be our middle panel. Then we're going to grab our other 2 panels with the slip pocket in, the lining panels, and we're going to find our 2 outer panels that we stitched earlier, and we're going to place them wrong sides together. We're going to clip and baste them all the way around the edge. Now remember, when we're basting within the seam allowance, so around about 1/8 of an inch or a couple of millimeters from the edge, and I'm using the longest stitch length on my machine, which for me is a 6. I'm also, when I'm basting, being careful not to sew the handles, so we want to keep those nice and clear out of the way. Because I have a long zipper pull on this, I'm just going to move that to the middle as well to make sure I don't accidentally try and stitch over that too. And of course we're going to do that on both panels. Okay, so that's those panels all done. I'm going to put them to one side and we're going to work on the side gussets. And that is our pattern piece 5, the funny shaped one. So we're going to just take one of them to start with, and we're going to place it right sides together so that we are lining up those bottom edges, or the shorter edges I should say. Pop a clip in there, and then we're going to stitch that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to turn that the right way through. If you're using quilting cotton, you're going to want to go ahead and press that in place. I'm obviously not, so I'm not going to put an iron near this. I'm just going to make sure it's folded nicely, pop a couple of clips in to help it lie how I want it to. And then I'm going to top stitch along that fold edge, and I'm then going to baste along the long edge and top stitch along the bottom and baste along the other side. So when we are basting, we are doing a long stitch, and we're doing the same distance from the edge all the way around, 2 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch, but we're changing the stitch length. So 3.5 along the top, 6 along the side, 3.5 along the bottom, and 6 along the other side. And I'm going to repeat that with the other side gusset. Okay, so with the side gussets done, I'm going to pop those to one side, and we're going to move on to our zipper. So I've grabbed one of the long zippers, and I have got the pattern piece 4 zipper gussets here, and we're going to need to have one of each of the lining and the outer. I'm going to pop 2 to one side, and we're going to need to have the thick gusset, lining and outer. But I'll pop those to one side for a second. I'm also going to be using my trusty double-sided tape. Make sure it's sewing tape rather than your regular stationery tape. And I'm going to grab my lining. I'm going to place my double-sided tape along that bottom edge. I am using 1/8 of an inch or around about 2 or 3 millimeter tape. Pop that along the bottom edge. And our lining is right side up. Then we're going to place our zipper right side up again, matching up the bottom edge of the zipper tape with the bottom edge of that gusset, pattern piece 4. Now at this point you could baste that in place a couple of millimeters from the edge, or around about 1/8 of an inch, or if you're like me, you want to crack on, I'm going to then place more double-sided tape on top, sandwiching the zipper tape, and then I'm going to place my outer zipper gusset right side down, again matching up that bottom edge. Now I'm going to take that over to the machine, and I'm going to sew that with 1/4 of an inch or around about 6 millimeter seam allowance. With that sewn, I'm going to flip the two so that they are wrong sides together. Pop some clips all the way along. And then I'm going to top stitch along that edge closest to the zipper, and I'm going to baste all the way around the other 3 sides as well, just to keep that all nice and together. So I'm actually going to start on this end, make my 3.5 stitch length. I know I said baste, but it's totally fine to do a shorter stitch length instead of the basting stitch length if you want to. Just saves on time by doing a longer stitch length when you're basting. Okay, with that stitched up, we're going to repeat that with the other side of the zipper and another lining and outer of pattern piece 4, zipper gusset. Okay, so our zipper panel is getting there. We're then going to take our thick gusset, pattern piece 3. We're going to place our zipper panel right side down. We're going to take our lining and place that right side down to the back of our zipper panel. Clip that in place. And we're going to base that in place a couple of millimeters or around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so that's basted in place. Now you may notice that my ends aren't exactly matched up. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I could snip it off to make it even if you want to, but I'm going to split the difference. So see how it's a little bit like 1/2 centimetre there and it's almost like 1 millimetre there. I'm just going to split the difference and I'm going to take my seam allowance from the middle of there, if that makes sense. So I'm going to flip it over. Place that right sides together. Obviously, ideally, it'll completely match up, but sometimes these things just happen. Then we're going to stitch with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from that edge. Okay, so it's looking like this. Then we're going to place our lining, to the back of the other short end, the opposite end. I'm going to clip and baste that in place, just like we did before. Then we're going to grab the outer and we're going to twist it so that it is right sides together still and have it match up with this short edge. Okay, so it's like that. We're going to pull that round, right sides together, clip in place. And then we're going to stitch that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so it's like that. Then we're going to flip those 2 gusset pieces so that they are wrong sides together, like so. I'm going to pop some clips along the 2 edges, just to keep those 2 layers together. Then I'm going to take it over to the machine. I'm going to top stitch along the zipper edges and I'm going to baste along the long edges. So top stitch 3.5 stitch length, basting 6 stitch length, and it's all the way around. It's going to be 2 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I'm going to start on this one of the long edges because that means that I can do my back stitch along that edge and there's no risk of it being seen on the nice top stitching edge. Okay, so we've got one of our zipper panels completed. Next, we are going to grab our final long zipper and our final 2 lining and outer zipper gussets. And we're going to grab our final pattern pieces, which is our thin gusset pattern piece 2, outer and lining. We're going to repeat what we did. Boys, why are you so loud? It's not dinner time. Right, I'm going to give you some nuggies because I want you to be quiet. Okay, so there is one zipper completed. We're going to move on to the other long zipper. Our 2 final zipper gussets, pattern piece 4, and our thin gusset piece, which is pattern piece, just need to check, pattern piece 2. And we've got the outer and the lining of those 2 pattern pieces. So we're going to repeat what we did with this zipper with our 2 long pieces and the thin gusset. So our lining piece right side up, matching up our zipper with the bottom edge. Then we're sandwiching it with the outer one. Then when it comes to the thin gusset, pattern piece 2, we're going to do the same as we did before, putting the lining on the back, right sides to the back of the zipper. Baste that in place, so matching it up along that edge, and we're going to do the same with our outer, right sides down. Notice that I'm not going to baste this in place. You don't have to do that original line of basting. It just makes it a little bit easier to explain the steps. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do just like I did before, reach that across, matching up the other edges to create that loop. And then, just like before, we're going to baste along the long edges and top stitch along the short edges. Okay, so now we have got our 2 zipper panels. Next thing we need to do is we need to mark the middle. So we want to fold our gusset in half. That's going to be our bottom middle. Make a mark. You could do a little snip as well. And then the opposite of that is going to be our top middle. And then if we match up our middle and our top, we'll get our 2 sides. So now we've marked the middle, top and bottom of that zipper panel. I'm then going to do the same on this one. And we also want to mark the middle, top and bottom of all of our other panels, our 3 panels. And our pattern piece 1 is going to help us with that. And on that middle panel, you're going to want to make sure both sides are marked. Okay, so next we're going to attach our thin gusset panel, or thin zipper gusset, to our middle panel. And this is the one with the 2 linings wrong side together that we basted earlier. And we're going to find the middle, top and bottom, and we're going to baste it around the edge. Now we are attaching the zipper side to the edge. So we're matching up those middle points at the top. And we want to have, it's really important that the thin gusset goes at the bottom. And we're going to clip and then baste that in place. Now it's worth noting that when we go towards the curves, we're going to want to snip into the zipper tape to help it go around that curve. There is a caveat: if you are using stripy zipper tape, be very careful because it could unravel. I will pop a link up on the video right now and also in the description to a video talking all about stripy zipper tape and why you shouldn't cut into it. And we're only cutting a couple of millimeters, around about 1/8 of an inch, into that seam allowance of the zipper tape to help it go round the curve. So it's worth noting while you're doing this that it is a really tight fit. It has been designed to be snug, but it will fit. Just persevere, snip into the zipper tape where you need to, and you can get it to fit in. Okay, so now as you can see, I've clipped it within 1 inch of its life. I'm going to go ahead and baste that within the seam allowance, so around about 1/8 of an inch or a couple of millimeters from the edge. Okay, then we're going to grab our wide zipper panel and we're going to make it so that it is wrong side out. And we're going to match up, just like we did before, the middle, bottom and the two sides. And we're going to clip and we're going to stitch that in place. So, middle top, middle bottom, and then clip all the way around. You may find that undoing the zip will help, and don't forget to, or both zips, don't forget to snip into the sides as we're going around the corners. And you're going to want to match up the bottom gusset, the two together. Okay, so now that's clipped in place, we're going to stitch that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you find that you can't get close enough, you can use a 1/4 of an inch or just under a centimetre seam allowance, you know, around about 6mm seam allowance, 6-7mm is the translation for 1/4 of an inch. And I would use a zipper foot, as you will see, to get nice and close as we're going around those corners. So next up, we're going to attach our side gussets. You want to have your project with the lining that is kind of got the raw edge right side up or facing you. And we are going to just twist it around so that we have got the edge of the zipper panel facing us, because then we are going to attach our side gusset to that side. And the placement for this is 3 centimeters up from the end, that seam of that bottom gusset. So I'm going to put that mark there, clip that in place, and then I'm going to baste it within the seam allowance. Then we're going to do the same on the other side, making sure that our zippers are completely out of the way. So again, we're measuring 3 centimeters up. I'll pop what that is in inches on the screen. Like so, and then we're going to baste that within the seam allowance on both sides to keep that in place. Okay, so our side gussets are in place. Now we are going to use our favourite method of binding to finish that seam. Now I have got this adhesive Hexatex, I believe it's called. I'll pop a link to where I got this in the description below. You can find a link to everything down there too. I've actually bought this by, I think I bought 1/2 meter, and then I cut it down to fit. And the reason why I love this is because it has already got the glue on the back, so it's a bit like using double-sided tape. You can of course use double-sided tape with regular bias binding, just whichever is your favourite method. And we're going to bind that edge all the way around. Okay, so my binding's clipped and ready to go. I'm going to go over to the machine and stitch that. I'm going to stitch through all the layers, trying to catch both edges of the binding. Be aware that it is thick and chunky in places, so you may need to hand crank as you go over some of the thicker areas. And I also recommend using a zipper foot. Okay, so with that binding now sewn, we're going to flip it over. So we've still got the zipper wrong side out on this other side, the raw edge facing up. I'm going to grab one of our main outer panels. I'm just going to pop that zipper pull into the middle so I don't catch it. And I'm going to make sure my handle is facing in, so it's wrong side up. And we're going to match up our middle marks just like we did before. And we're going to clip and stitch all the way around, and we're using a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Remember to snip into the gusset to help it go around the corners, and take your time to kind of get everything fitting nicely. And at this point we're leaving out these side gussets so we can flip those around. I'm just going to clip those out of the way so I don't get them caught for now. And if you've got any edges that are not exactly lined up, you can trim that seam allowance down because we are going to be binding that edge. Okay, with that trimmed down, we're then going to unclip those side gussets. And we need to baste them to that side that we have just stitched. So again, just like we did here, we are going to measure up 3 centimeters from the bottom. It should be straight across from the other side. Clip that in place. And then I'm going to baste that within the seam allowance. And of course we want to do that on the other side as well. So with the side gussets stitched on, basted on, we can then bind that seam. So again, I'm going to be using this adhesive Hexatex, just like I did before. I'm going to place it all around the edge, clip it, and then stitch it through all the layers. Remember that it's going to get chunky in some places, a little bit thick, so you can go up a needle size. You can use a jeans needle if you are finding it too thick to get through with the layers. Okay, so we're on the home stretch. We're going to pop that the right way out. Then we're going to have that final side for the other main panel, front panel or back panel. I'm just going to chop off that excess fold over elastic that I missed before. We want to have this zipper, this final zipper, wrong side out, and then we're going to insert our final panel so that they are right sides together. And just like before, we are going to clip and stitch all the way around. Now you want to, just like before, make sure that you have got it the right way up, so the kind of gusset at the bottom of the zipper, so the thin gusset, as we called it earlier, is at the bottom of your main panel. And once again, we're stitching this with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, or 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to trim off any uneven edges. And then, as you may have guessed, we are going to bind that final edge. So all of your binding is done, and guess what? Your bag is finished too. All you need to do is push it all the way out, get those seams really nice and popped through, and you've finished your cabay. And so you can see the difference between having no stabiliser and faux leather on the outer front and back panels. And then on this version that we have just made, we have got the stabiliser on all 3 panels. So you can see it's a lot more structure, it's a lot more shaped in that oval shape. It keeps it a lot better. So it's totally up to you as to which your preference is. I really hope you've loved this tutorial. Do check my other videos on my channel. Coming up on the screen right now is a video that I think you're going to love. This is the Nighway bag.